The grand, silent hall of the Cathar Royal Palace felt colder than the vacuum of space Kyle Young had just traversed, its crystalline walls reflecting his own grim visage. Kyle adjusted the ridiculously formal cuffs of the ceremonial human attire, a stark reminder he wasn't a diplomat here, but the final living installment for a debt his ancestors incurred. "Just get through this," he told himself. The sentiment a worn-out mantra from weeks of dread. Earth's tenuous peace with the Cathar Empire hinged on this offering him to their unreadable aloof princess. And as the great doors at the far end of the hall began to part, he knew the moment of exchange. The first look at his bride was upon him. The herald's voice, a resonant baritone that seemed to vibrate the very crystals of the walls, announced, "Her Imperial Highness, Princess Arya of Cathar." Through the parting doors swept a figure of breathtaking, yet healing, majesty. Princess Arya was magnificent in her 7-foot, silver-skinned Cathar glory, adorned with intricate bioluminescent filigree that pulsed with a slow, cold light, like captured starlight breathing. Her eyes, like polished obsidian, surveyed the hall but held no flicker of greeting, disdain, or anything at all. She moved with chilling grace, a beautiful automaton offered up to settle accounts, each step measured and silent upon the crystalline floor. Kyle's breath hitched, a sharp intake of air that felt loud in the oppressive silence. It wasn't just her alien beauty or imposing stature that struck him, but the profound, unnerving emptiness radiating from her, a palpable coldness that had nothing to do with the ambient temperature. This wasn't a political marriage. It felt like a transaction with a statue carved from moonlight and ice. The Cathar High Chancellor, a wizened being whose many-faceted eyes glittered like a cluster of dark gems, intoned from a raised dais, his voice dry as ancient parchment. "Present the tribute, as per the ancient accord of Sol Cathar." A subtle pressure from a Cathar guard at his elbow nudged Kyle forward. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the hall's solemnity. As tradition dictated for such a union, he was instructed to offer his ungloved hand, palm up. He extended it, noting the slight tremor he couldn't quite control. Princess Arya, her face an exquisite, emotionless mask of silver, slowly extended her own larger, elegantly tapered hand. Her cool, smooth fingers, tipped with nails like polished obsidian, lightly brushed his palm in the brief ceremonial contact required to seal the pact, the consummation of Earth's debt. For an infinitesimal second, as their skin met, Kyle felt a bizarre jolt, not unpleasant, but utterly unexpected, like a tiny spark of static electricity, or a faint, internal chime. He saw it then, a micro-expression he would have missed if his entire being hadn't been focused on her. Arya's obsidian eyes widened almost imperceptibly. The barest flicker, was it shock? Confusion? Rippling across their flat, depthless surface before they shuddered back to icy stillness. Her fingers, which had been resting with feather-light pressure, made a micro-recoil from his touch, as if his skin had suddenly flared with heat. A reaction so swift, so minute, he almost doubted he'd seen it. But in that fleeting instant, a certainty settled deep in Kyle's gut. Her profound nothingness, the terrifying void he'd witnessed, had just encountered its first shocking contradiction. Something had happened. Something had begun. Around them, the Cathar court remained impassive, their iridescent robes shimmering, their alien faces unreadable. No one else seemed to have noticed the spark that had jumped between tribute and princess. The High Chancellor delivered a final, solemn pronouncement, his words echoing in the vastness, declaring the accord fulfilled and the union sealed. The great doors began to close, shutting out the rest of the galaxy. Kyle was left standing beside his silent, silver bride, the chill of the hall seeping into his bones, overshadowed only by the heat of the unsettling mystery now burning within him. What, in the cold void of Princess Arya, had his touch managed to ignite? Ignite? The question echoed in the sterile silence of his assigned quarters, a silence that pressed in on him, heavier than the gravity of this alien world. It wasn't just a spark, it was a defiance of everything he'd been told to expect. He adjusted the collar of his tunic, the fabric stiff and unfamiliar against his skin. The room itself was a paradox, opulent in its materials, the walls shimmering with embedded crystals, yet utterly devoid of warmth. Abstract sculptures of swirling energy patterns stood on pedestals, their purpose indecipherable. He didn't understand the art, the technology, the very aesthetic of this place. He was an outsider, a specimen on display. A soft chime announced the arrival of Unit 734, his assigned servant. The Cathar was tall, even by their standards, its silver skin smooth and unblemished. "Your needs, human Kyle," it intoned, the voice synthesized and devoid of inflection. "Just water, please," Kyle replied, trying for a friendly tone. "And, how has your cycle been?" Query outside programmed parameters. Unit 734 responded, its obsidian eyes unwavering. It turned and glided silently to a dispenser, filling a crystalline glass with water before presenting it to Kyle. The interaction was a stark reminder. Here, humanity was an anomaly, a deviation from the norm. He took the water and moved towards the connecting doorway to Arya's quarters. He could see her through the shimmering energy field that served as a door. She stood motionless before a massive viewport, gazing out at the sprawling cityscape of the Cathar homeworld. Crystalline towers pierced the violet sky, connected by bridges of shimmering light. It was beautiful, alien, and utterly indifferent to his presence. He watched her for what felt like hours, her posture unchanging, her face an unreadable mask. Back in his own quarters, Kyle accessed the translated Cathar etiquette guides. Direct eye contact is considered a challenge. Displays of emotion are seen as weakness. Individuality is discouraged in favor of societal harmony. The words swam before his eyes, painting a picture of a society built on control and suppression. It clarified the view, her actions, but it didn't make it simple. He started a new routine. "Wake. Eat the bland nutrient paste provided," observed Arya. "Study the etiquette guides and try to make sense of his surroundings." He started noting subtle details. A slight tremor in Arya's hand when a particular frequency of sonic vibration pulsed through the room. A barely perceptible widening of her eyes when bathed in violet light. Were these triggers? Were they keys to unlocking something within her? During a formal dinner, another silent, stilted affair, Kyle decided to test the waters. "The Earth," he began, addressing Arya, "is quite different from Cathar. We have art that expresses emotion, music that makes you feel." Arya turned her obsidian gaze upon him. "Earth art serves no practical purpose," she stated, her voice flat. "It serves to connect us," Kyle countered gently, "to share experiences, to understand each other." A flicker. Just a brief, almost imperceptible widening of her eyes. "Human art?" she asked, the question devoid of inflection, yet somehow curious. Emboldened, Kyle requested access to the royal archives, claiming a need to understand Cathar history for diplomatic purposes. His request was granted, but with a chilling caveat. He would be accompanied by a royal archivist at all times. He was a prisoner with privileges, not a guest. The archives were a vast repository of knowledge, filled with crystalline data shards and ancient scrolls. The archivist, a wizened Cathar named Lyra, watched him with suspicion. Kyle spent hours poring over translated texts, searching for any clue to explain Arya's state and the Cathar's emotional suppression. He found it. Deep within the archives, hidden amongst genealogical records, were ancient texts describing a time when the Cathar were deeply emotional, passionate, and artistic. They had created symphonies of light and sound, sculptures that pulsed with life, and poetry that explored the depths of the soul. What had happened? He dug deeper, bypassing Lyra when she took a mandatory rest cycle. He found a hidden passage in one text detailing a great silence that occurred millennia ago. It spoke of a catastrophe, a time when unchecked emotions had led to chaos and destruction, nearly destroying their civilization. The passage was vague, almost mythical, but the implication was clear. The Cathar had deliberately suppressed their emotions to survive. Now he understood, at least in part, but understanding didn't make it any easier. He returned to his quarters and began subtly testing Arya's reactions. He played melancholic earth melodies, observed her response to different colors, even attempted a simple human joke. Why don't scientists trust atoms? Because they make up everything. Looking for any sign of change, any flicker of recognition. One evening, while Kyle was playing a haunting piano piece, a song his mother used to play, Arya entered his quarters unexpectedly. She stood silently in the doorway, her obsidian eyes fixed on him. She didn't speak, but he noticed her hand clenching slightly, the silver skin taut against the crystalline structure beneath. Suppressed emotion, he was sure of it. Emboldened, he stopped playing and gently touched her hand. Her skin was cool, smooth as polished ice. She flinched, a barely perceptible tremor, but she didn't pull away. He looked into her eyes and saw it, a brief flash of fear, stark and raw, before the emotion was extinguished, leaving only the familiar, empty void. His touch was still affecting her. A sharp chime announced the arrival of Counselor Valerius, a high-ranking Cathar official. He entered the quarters, his gaze sweeping over Kyle and Arya with cold disapproval. "Human Kyle," he intoned, his voice like the grinding of crystals. "I trust you are finding your accommodations satisfactory." "They are adequate, Counselor," Kyle replied, carefully maintaining a neutral expression. "It has come to our attention that you have been exploring Cathar history," Valerius continued, his obsidian eyes unwavering. "While we appreciate your diligence, it is imperative that you do not disrupt established traditions. Princess Arya's stability is of paramount importance. Any deviation will have consequences." The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Kyle realized then, Arya's emotional control wasn't just custom, it was actively pushed. The Council knew of her abilities, and they were set to manage it. He suspected that Valerius, and perhaps others, knew exactly what his touch was doing to her. He looked at Arya, standing silently beside him, her face an unreadable mask. He saw her not just as a political pawn, but as a person trapped by her own society, a prisoner in a gilded cage. He made a decision. He would help her explore her emotions, safely, even if it meant defying the Cathar court. He turned back to Arya. "There was a time in my life," Kyle began, speaking softly, "when I felt lost. I had failed at something I cared deeply about. and I didn't know how to move forward. I felt empty. He paused, searching for the right words. But I learned that emotions, even the painful ones, can be a source of strength. They can guide you, inspire you, help you to overcome challenges. Arya continued to stare at him, her expression unchanging. He wondered if his words were even registering. Then, unexpectedly, she spoke. One word, barely a whisper, but filled with a depth of emotion he hadn't thought possible. Why? Why? Arya repeated, her obsidian eyes fixed on Kyle, unblinking. The question hung in the air of their opulent, yet isolating, quarters. Kyle swallowed, searching for words. How did one explain the chaotic, illogical landscape of human emotion to someone who had never experienced it? Well, he began, think of it like different wavelengths of light. Happiness is like the bright, warm glow of a sunrise. It makes you feel buoyant, energetic. He gestured vaguely, trying to capture the feeling. Sadness is more like the muted blue of twilight. It's heavy, a sense of loss. As he spoke, a flicker crossed Arya's face, a fleeting expression of something. Her hand, resting on the crystalline table, twitched. A moment later she blinked, and the emotionless mask was back in place. But Kyle had seen it. Arya tilted her head, processing. Light and weight. These are measurable phenomena, but the feeling itself, how do you quantify that? Kyle chuckled softly. You can't. That's the frustrating and beautiful thing about it. It's subjective. It's personal. Imagine a story, he continued, trying a different approach. A story where someone achieves a great victory. The feeling of triumph, of pride, that's happiness. Suddenly, Arya gasped, her body stiffening. Her eyes widened, unfocused, as if she were seeing something that wasn't there. A faint tremor ran through her silver skin. Images flashed behind her eyes. A cheering crowd, a banner waving, a sense of elation. But then, just as quickly, it was gone, leaving her disoriented. What? What was that? She whispered, clutching her head. Arya? Are you all right? Kyle reached for her, concern etched on his face. She recoiled slightly. I do not know. Images, feelings, alien. Kyle's unease grew. He had a feeling that something more than just intellectual curiosity was stirring within Arya, and he wasn't sure it was quite safe. He also noticed a slight shift in the air there. A staff paused a moment near the doorway. A coded message flashed briefly on his datapad, quickly disappearing. He felt the unnerving sensation of being watched, scrutinized. Determined to find a less jarring approach, Kyle decided to introduce Arya to the world of human art. He presented her with a curated collection: paintings, sculptures, musical recordings, landscapes, portraits, abstract expressions of joy and sorrow. Arya examined each piece with detached curiosity, analyzing the brushstrokes, the composition, the harmonic frequencies. Nothing seemed to resonate until she came to a landscape painting, a vibrant depiction of Earth's Grand Canyon at sunset, the fiery hues of orange and red, the vastness of the landscape, the sense of ancient power. It seemed to stir something within her. Her hand trembled as she reached out to touch the canvas. A faint pulse of bioluminescence emanated from her fingertips, illuminating the painting with an ethereal glow. Her breathing quickened. Just then, the door to their quarters slid open, and Counselor Valerius strode in, his expression grim. Princess Arya, he said, his voice cold and formal, I must speak with you. And Commander Young, Valerius turned his gaze to Kyle. His many eyes narrowed. "Commander, I have received concerning reports about your experiments with Her Highness. I must remind you that the stability of the Empire depends on the princess maintaining her composure. Any further emotional instability will have severe repercussions." He paused, his gaze hardening. "For both of you." After Valerius left, Kyle knew he was walking on thin ice. He needed to understand what was happening to Arya, and fast. He also needed to find someone he could trust. Remembering a passing comment from one of the palace servants, Kyle sought out a historian named Lyra, rumored to harbor unorthodox views about the Cathar past. Their clandestine meeting took place in a dimly lit corner of the royal gardens, the air thick with the scent of alien flora. Lyra, a wiry Cathar with surprisingly gentle eyes, listened intently as Kyle described Arya's transformation. "The great silence," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "Many believe it was a necessary step, a way to control our volatile emotions. But some of us, we believe it was a mistake, that we lost something essential when we suppressed our feelings." She offered Kyle a small, hopeful smile. "I will help you, Commander, for the sake of the princess, and for the sake of our people." That night, Arya approached Kyle with an uncharacteristic hesitancy. "Commander Young," she began, her voice barely a whisper, "I have been considering your explanations of human emotion. I believe I understand the concept of happiness, of sadness. But what does it feel like to love?" She looked at him, her obsidian eyes searching, pleading. "I wish to understand the sensation, not merely the definition." Kyle's heart skipped a beat. This was it. This was the moment he had been waiting for. He took a deep breath and began to explain, carefully, gently. He described the warmth, the connection, the overwhelming sense of protectiveness, the joy of shared experiences. He then guided her through a simple emotional exercise. He asked her to associate colors, sounds, and memories with different feelings. At first, she struggled, her mind blank. But slowly, painstakingly, she began to make connections. The color blue reminded her of the crystalline walls of her palace. The sound of wind chimes evoked a fleeting sense of peace. As the exercise progressed, Arya grew increasingly agitated. The intensity of her nascent feelings was overwhelming her. Her breathing became ragged. Her body trembled. Suddenly, she broke down, tears streaming down her face, for the first time in her life. The sight of her crying was both terrifying and heartbreaking. He had unlocked something profound, something powerful, but he had also unleashed a torrent of emotions that she was ill-equipped to handle. "Arya," he said softly, reaching out to her. It's all right to feel." He gently pulled her into his arms, offering her reassurance and a safe space to express her emotions. He discovered that physical touch, something previously forbidden, seemed to ground her, to anchor her to the present moment. Later that night, Arya had a vivid dream. Swirling colors, fragmented memories, overwhelming emotions. She saw faces she didn't recognize, felt sensations she couldn't name. She woke up, disoriented and afraid, her heart pounding in her chest. Kyle encouraged her to keep a dream journal, to record her dreams in a coded language that only they could understand. He hoped that by processing her emotions, she could gain insight into her suppressed past. As Arya began to record her dreams, Counselor Valerius's suspicions grew. He discovered evidence of Kyle's activities. The artwork, The dream journal, the meetings with Lyra. He had enough. He gave the order to detain Kyle. Lyra and the Cathar objectors, hearing he'd be held, moved fast. They helped Kyle escape Valerius's guards, providing him with a temporary safe haven in the lower levels of the palace, a labyrinth of forgotten tunnels and hidden chambers. As Valerius's guards stormed their quarters, intent on arresting Kyle, Arya unexpectedly intervened. She stepped in front of Kyle, shielding him with her body. "You will not touch him," she said, her voice ringing with a newfound authority. She shoved one of the guards aside with surprising strength. Valerius stared at her, his many eyes wide with shock. "Arya," he said, his voice trembling, "what has he done to you?" Arya glared at Valerius, her obsidian eyes blazing with anger and protectiveness. Emotions she had never felt before, emotions she could no longer suppress. "He has shown me what it means to be alive," she said, her voice filled with defiance. "And I will not let you take that away from me." Realizing that they were no longer safe, that they had no future within the confines of the royal court, Kyle and Arya made a decision. They would flee. They would leave behind everything they knew, everything they had ever been, and embrace an uncertain future together. The Grand Hall, with its silent judgment, was behind them. Now, Kyle and Arya plunged into darkness. The Undercity reeked of damp stone and forgotten things, a stark contrast to the sterile perfection above. Water trickled down the walls, and the air hung thick and heavy, tasting of mildew and something else. Something ancient. "Where are we?" Kyle asked, his voice echoing strangely in the low tunnel. He kept his weapon raised, a habit hard to break. Arya, her silver skin barely visible in the gloom, seemed disoriented. "Below, the palace foundations, a forgotten place." They moved deeper, the tunnel opening into a vast cavern. Flickering luminescent moss clung to the walls, providing a dim, ethereal light that revealed a sprawling network of tunnels and crumbling structures. Figures moved in the shadows, their eyes glinting in the dim light. "Welcome," a voice called out, "to the Undercity, a place the Empire forgot, or wishes it had." A group of Cathar emerged from the shadows, their faces etched with defiance and weariness. They were a motley crew. Some wore tattered versions of imperial uniforms, others were clad in scavenged materials, and all bore the mark of outcasts. "I am Theron." A tall, wiry Cathar stepped forward. His eyes, though wary, held a spark of intelligence. "We are those who remember what the Empire has tried to erase. What brings you to our hidden home?" "We needed to disappear," Kyle replied, keeping his tone neutral. "The leader. He's aware of Alara." Theron observed them both, his gaze settling on Alara. "The Harris. So the reports are valid. The newcomer has awakened something within her." "Awakened?" Arya echoed, her voice barely a whisper. Theron led them deeper into the Undercity, past crumbling archways and decaying murals. The air grew heavier, laden with the weight of history. This was once a place of art, of music, of emotion. Before the Great Silence, before the Empire decided that feelings were a weakness, they reached a vast ruined chamber. Faded paintings adorned the walls, depicting scenes of joy, sorrow, and everything in between. In the center of the chamber stood the skeletal remains of a theater, its stage collapsed and its seats overgrown with moss. Arya stopped, her hand flying to her chest. A wave of emotion washed over her, so intense it nearly brought her to her knees. Grief, raw and overwhelming, flooded her senses. It was as if the echoes of 1,000 lost performances were crashing down upon her. "What is this?" she gasped, her voice choked with emotion. Kyle rushed to her side, supporting her. Arya, what's wrong? I, I don't know, she stammered, tears welling in her obsidian eyes. It hurts so much. Kyle held her close, his hand stroking her silver hair. Focus on me, Arya. Focus on the present. We need to survive. We need to figure out what's happening. His words, practical and grounding, seemed to anchor her. The wave of grief receded slightly, leaving her shaken but stable. Thank you, she whispered, her voice trembling. As they explored the Undercity further, Kyle noticed something unsettling. Small, almost invisible drones flitted through the tunnels, their lenses glinting in the dim light. We're being watched, he murmured to Arya. Valerius, he's not letting us go. Just then, a voice crackled in Kyle's ear. It was Lyra, her voice distorted and urgent. Kyle, can you hear me? Valerius knows about the Undercity. He's planning a raid. Get out while you can. The connection broke, leaving Kyle with a sinking feeling. They were running out of time. Theron approached them, his expression grim. There is a way out, a secret exit, known only to a few. It leads beyond the palace walls. He hesitated, his eyes darting nervously. But to reach it, you must trust me completely. He gestured to a hidden passage behind a crumbling statue. This map, it shows the way. But the path is fraught with peril. What do you need from us? Kyle asked, his hand resting on his weapon. Theron's gaze locked with Kyle's. I need to know where your loyalties lie. I need to know if you are truly committed to Arya, and to our cause. He paused, then spoke the words that sent a chill down Kyle's spine. You must undergo the emotional bonding ritual. A Qatar custom, long forgotten by the Empire. It will reveal your true feeling and your true intentions. It's dangerous, Arya whispered, her eyes filled with concern. The ritual. It can be overwhelming. I'll do it, Kyle said, his voice firm. He looked at Arya, his eyes filled with tenacity. I'm not afraid. Theron led them to a small, circular chamber. In the center stood a stone altar, etched with ancient symbols. He produced a small, ornate blade. This ritual, it will open your mind to the Cathar past. You will experience the events that led to the Great Silence. It will test your strength and your sanity. Kyle lay down on the altar, his heart pounding in his chest. Theron began to chant, his voice resonating with power. He raised the blade, and with a swift motion, made a small incision on Kyle's forehead. A wave of energy surged through Kyle's body, throwing him into a vortex of images and emotions. He saw the Qatar of old, vibrant and passionate, their lives filled with art, music, and love. He saw the events that led to the Great Silence, a devastating war, fueled by unchecked emotions, that nearly destroyed their civilization. He saw the decision to suppress emotions, to create a society based on logic and control. He felt the pain, the fear, and the despair of a people who had sacrificed their humanity for the sake of survival. Arya stood beside the altar, her hand hovering over Kyle's body. Through their connection, she experienced his vision, feeling his fear and his pain. Tears streamed down her face, her heart aching for the suffering of her ancestors. Their bond deepened, forged in the crucible of shared experience. As the vision faded, Kyle gasped for breath, his body trembling. He looked at Theron, his eyes filled with understanding. I see, he said, his voice hoarse. I understand what you've been through. Theron's expression was unreadable. And what do you intend to do with this knowledge? I intend to help Arya, Kyle replied, his voice firm. To help her find her own path, to help her decide what kind of Cathar she wants to be. Theron's eyes narrowed. You misunderstand. Arya's awakening. It's not just about her. It's about our people. It's about reclaiming our past. It's about sparking a rebellion against the Empire. He stepped closer to Arya, his hand reaching out to touch her. With your power, Princess, we can break the chains of the Great Silence. We can unleash the full potential of the Cathar race. No, Arya said, her voice filled with defiance. I will not be a weapon. I will not be used to fuel your rebellion. Theron's face hardened. You have no choice, Princess. Your destiny is to lead our people to freedom. Suddenly, the ground began to shake. The sound of explosions echoed through the Undercity. They're here, Kyle said, his voice grim. Valerius is attacking. Theron grabbed Arya's arm, pulling her towards the hidden passage. We must escape, now. As they fled through the tunnels, the Undercity erupted in chaos. Gunfire echoed through the narrow passageways, and explosions rocked the crumbling structures. Theron, his eyes burning with fanaticism, tried to force Arya to amplify her emotions, intending to use her as a weapon against Valerius's forces. No, stop it, Kyle shouted, grabbing Theron's arm. You're hurting her. Theron shoved Kyle away, his face contorted with rage. She is the key to our salvation. I will not let you stand in our way. A fight ensued, the two men grappling in the narrow tunnel. Theron, despite his age, was surprisingly strong and ruthless. During the chaos, Valerius appeared, his face a mask of cold fury. He cornered Kyle and Arya, his weapon raised. It ends here, Valerius said, his voice dripping with venom. The Great Silence will not be broken. I will not allow emotions to destroy our civilization again. He paused, his gaze locking on Arya. My sister. She was consumed by her emotions. She brought shame and ruin to our family. I will not let the same happen to you. Arya, her eyes filled with a newfound strength, raised her hand. A wave of power surged from her, stopping Valerius. But she paused, her hand near the device. I can't, she breathed, her voice shaking. I can't hurt him. Theron took his chance, rushing ahead and grabbing Valerius's weapon. With a quick motion, he fired, striking the leader instantly. The rebellion has begun, Theron declared, his voice ringing with triumph. Kyle and Arya stood frozen, trapped between two opposing forces, with no clear path forward. The Undercity, their sanctuary, had become a battleground. The Great Silence, it seemed, was about to be shattered. But at what cost? But at what cost? The question echoed in Kyle's mind as he sprinted through the alien foliage, Arya close behind. Energy blasts sizzled past, incinerating the strange phosphorescent plants. Theron, a whirlwind of controlled fury, covered their retreat, his energy blade a blur of silver light. They burst into a clearing, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and something akin to ozone. Before them lay the rebel encampment, a haphazard collection of repurposed Cathar structures nestled amongst towering bioluminescent fungi. It was a far cry from the sterile opulence of the royal palace, or even the decaying grandeur of the Undercity. This was a place of survival, of harsh necessity. Welcome to the heart of the resistance, Theron announced, his voice strained but resolute. He gestured to the camp with a sweep of his hand. Here, we fight for a future free from Valerius's tyranny, a future where Cathar can once again embrace their true selves. Kyle frowned. Valerius is dead. We saw to that. Theron's heart made. Valerius was a symptom, not the disease. The Empire's grip on our emotions, It's suppression of our very being that is the true enemy. Arya's awakening is a symbol of hope, a beacon for those who yearn to feel again. Kyle glanced at Arya, her silver skin pale in the dim light. She looked overwhelmed, the weight of Theron's words pressing down on her. He noticed several Cathar being escorted, or rather dragged, into the camp. Their faces were etched with fear and resentment. "And what about them?" Kyle asked, gesturing towards the unwilling recruits. "Are they here by choice?" Theron's eyes flashed. Desperate times demand difficult choices. They will come to understand the necessity of their sacrifice. Arya stepped forward, her voice barely a whisper. "Theron, must we resort to such methods? Is there no other way?" "There is no easy path to freedom, Arya," Theron replied, his voice softening as he turned to her. "The Empire will not relinquish its control willingly. We must be prepared to do whatever it takes to protect you, to protect the hope you represent." Kyle saw the conflict in Arya's eyes, the struggle between her desire for peace and her sense of obligation to her people. He also saw the growing influence Theron held over her, the way she seemed to defer to his judgment. Later that evening, as they shared a meager meal of synthesized protein paste, Kyle learned that the rebels were critically low on supplies. Theron was planning a raid on a nearby Cathar agricultural settlement to replenish their stock. "A raid?" Kyle asked, his voice infused with concern. "Won't that alienate potential supporters?" "It seems counterproductive." Theron shrugged. "Sentimentality is a luxury we cannot afford. The farmers are loyal to the Empire. They will not willingly aid our cause. But violence against civilians," Kyle began, but Theron cut him off. "Collateral damage is inevitable in war. We must focus on the greater good." Arya remained silent, her gaze fixed on her plate. Kyle could sense her unease, her internal struggle. "Arya, surely you don't agree with this," Kyle said, turning to her. She looked up, her obsidian eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and drive. "Theron is right. We must do what is necessary to survive." "But at what cost?" Kyle pressed, his voice rising. "Are you willing to sacrifice your principles for the sake of victory?" "I am willing to do whatever it takes to protect my people," she replied, her voice firm. "Theron understands the Cathar struggle in a way that you, as an outsider, cannot." Kyle felt a pang of disappointment, a sense of growing distance between them. Theron had successfully driven a wedge between them, exploiting Arya's vulnerability and her sense of responsibility. The next morning, Kyle accompanied the rebels on the raid. As he watched them descend upon the unsuspecting Cathar farmers, their energy blades flashing in the dim light, his worst fears were confirmed. The rebels were using excessive force, terrorizing the civilians and looting their meager supplies. He saw one rebel strike down an elderly farmer who refused to surrender his meager store of nutrient paste. Disgusted, Kyle intervened, grabbing the rebel's arm. "Enough," he shouted. "This is not the way." The rebel, a hulking Cathar with a scarred face, glared at him. "Stay out of this, human. This is Cathar business." "It's wrong," Kyle retorted, his voice rising. "These are innocent people." Theron appeared, his expression a mask of disapproval. "Kyle, stand down. This is necessary." "Necessary?" Kyle scoffed. "This is brutality. You're no better than Valerius." Arya watched the scene unfold, her face a mixture of horror and indecision. She knew Kyle was right, but she also felt obligated to support Theron, the man who had taken her in and promised to protect her. "Arya, tell him to stop," Kyle pleaded, turning to her. "Tell him this is wrong." Arya hesitated, her eyes darting between Kyle and Theron. Theron, perhaps we could. Arya, Theron interrupted, his voice sharp, do not let his sentimentality cloud your judgment. He is an outsider. He does not understand the sacrifices we must make. Arya's face hardened. Kyle, I appreciate your concern, but this is not your fight. Stand aside. Kyle felt a wave of despair wash over him. He had lost her, at least for now. Theron's influence had proven too strong. Later that night, unable to sleep, Kyle wandered through the encampment. He overheard a hushed conversation coming from one of the repurposed structures. Curiosity piqued, he crept closer and peered inside. He saw Theron standing over a prone Cathar, his face contorted in a mixture of concentration and cruelty. The captive was strapped to a table, his eyes wide with terror. Strange devices were attached to his head, emitting a pulsating violet light. "What are you doing?" Kyle demanded, bursting into the room. Theron whirled around, his expression one of shock and anger. "You should not be here." "What are you doing to him?" Kyle repeated, his voice trembling with rage. "I am accelerating the awakening process," Theron replied, his voice defensive. "These volunteers are helping us unlock the secrets of emotion." "Volunteers?" Kyle scoffed, gesturing to the terrified captive. "He looks terrified." "The ends justify the means," Theron insisted, his eyes gleaming with fanaticism. "Arya's awakening is too important to risk. We must find a way to replicate it, to spread it throughout our people." "You're experimenting on them," Kyle accused, his voice rising. "You're exploiting their suffering in the name of freedom." "I am giving them a gift," Theron retorted. "The gift of feeling. The gift of being truly alive." Arya appeared in the doorway, her face etched with horror. She had overheard their argument. "Theron, what is going on here?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Theron turned to her, his expression softening. "Arya, I can explain." "No," she said, shaking her head. "I see now. You're not a savior. You're a monster." As Arya reeled from this revelation, the ground began to tremble. Alarms blared throughout the encampment. "We're under attack," someone shouted. "Cathar Patrol." Energy blasts ripped through the air, tearing apart the makeshift structures. The rebels scrambled for weapons, their faces etched with fear. Arya looked at Theron, her eyes filled with betrayal. "You did this," she whispered. "Your recklessness has doomed us all." Theron ignored her, his gaze fixed on the approaching Cathar patrol. "Arya, you must focus," he said, his voice urgent. "Your emotions. I can amplify them, create a psychic shockwave that will cripple their forces." He reached out to her, his hand outstretched. Arya hesitated, torn between her desire to help and her newfound distrust of Theron. Kyle saw the danger, the way Theron was attempting to manipulate Arya, to use her as a weapon. He knew that if she unleashed her emotions in such an uncontrolled manner, it could destroy her and the rebels. Without hesitation, Kyle shoved Arya aside, severing her connection with Theron. "No!" Theron roared, his face contorted with rage. "You fool! You've ruined everything." As the battle raged around them, a figure emerged from the chaos, a Cathar officer with cold, calculating eyes. He wore the uniform of the Imperial Guard, his energy blade gleaming in the dim light. "Theron," he said, his voice devoid of emotion, "your rebellion ends here." He turned his gaze to Kyle and Arya. "Human, princess, I offer you safe passage back to the Empire. In exchange for Theron's capture." He paused, his obsidian eyes piercing. "Choose wisely." Your lives depend on it. The uneasy silence that followed Theron's outburst hung heavy in the air. Arya's silver skin seemed to absorb the dim light of the rebel camp, making her appear even more withdrawn. Kyle watched her, gauging the conflicting emotions swirling beneath her stoic surface. He knew this decision burdened immensely on her. "It's the only way, Arya," Kyle said softly, breaking the silence. "Theron's methods are unsustainable. More bloodshed won't solve anything." Arya finally met his gaze, her obsidian eyes troubled. "But Varkas, can we trust him?" "Trust is a luxury we can't afford," Kyle countered, his voice firm. "But we can use him. He wants you, Arya. We can use that to protect the others." After a tense discussion, they agreed. It was a gamble, a desperate move, but it offered the best chance of saving lives. Kyle turned to Varkas, who had been observing them with a predatory gleam in his multifaceted eyes. "We accept your offer, counselor, but I have conditions." Varkas inclined his head, a flicker of amusement crossing his features. "Conditions? From a human?" "Arya's safety," Kyle stated, his voice unwavering. "And a guarantee that Theron will be treated fairly under Cathar law." Varkas paused, considering. "Such sentimentality. Very well, I give you my word. Princess Arya will be under my personal protection, and Theron will receive a fair trial." Varkas saw an opportunity, control of the princess, and the potential to discredit a troublesome rebel leader. The revelation of their decision landed like a physical blow on Theron. He surged to his feet, his face contorted with fury. "Betrayal! You would trust that, Imperial dog?" He turned to Arya, his voice infused with desperate emotion. "Arya, you can't do this. They'll control you. They'll suppress your awakening." Kyle stepped forward, placing himself between Theron and Arya. "She's making her own choice, Theron. You can't manipulate her with your emotions anymore." He saw the flicker of doubt in Arya's eyes, the lingering loyalty she still felt for her former comrade. "Manipulation?" Kyle continued, his voice calm but firm. "You used her, Theron. You exploited her grief, her anger, to fuel your rebellion. You never cared about her, only about what she could do for you." Kyle's words struck home. Arya's face hardened, her gaze unwavering. "He's right, Theron," she said, her voice cold. "I see that now. Your rebellion, it was never about freedom, but about power." She sided with Kyle, a definitive severing of ties. She agreed to cooperate with Varkas, but a secret plan began to form in her mind, to use her position to protect the remaining rebels from Imperial retribution. The journey back to the Imperial city was tense. Arya sat rigidly, her gaze fixed on the passing landscape. Varkas, seated opposite her, subtly probed her about her awakening. "The changes you have experienced, Princess, they are fascinating. Tell me, what does it feel like to feel?" Kyle, seated beside Arya, watched Varkas carefully. He saw the veiled threats, the manipulative tactics. They had merely traded one oppressor for another. He subtly shifted his position, placing himself more firmly between Arya and Varkas. A plan began to take shape in his mind, a desperate gamble to protect her from the counselor's clutches. The Imperial city glittered in the distance, a sprawling metropolis of crystalline towers and shimmering energy fields. As their transport landed, Arya was greeted as a returning hero, the prodigal princess who had seen the error of her ways. But the welcome felt hollow, tainted by the watchful eyes of the Imperial Guard. She was immediately placed under strict surveillance, confined to luxurious quarters that mirrored her previous gilded cage. Kyle, as a human, was considered less of a threat. He was granted more freedom of movement within the city, ostensibly to familiarize himself with Qatar culture, but in reality, it was a chance to gather information, to assess their situation, to find a way out. He soon discovered that the empire was not as monolithic as it seemed. There were factions within the government, some intrigued by Arya's awakening, others fearful of its potential consequences. He heard quiet objections from those who quietly disliked the realm's strict rule. One such person was a Cathar scientist, Lyra. He found her in a hidden corner of the Imperial Library, poring over ancient texts. She approached him cautiously, her voice barely a whisper. "You're the human, the one who awakened the princess." Kyle nodded, wary. "And you are?" "Lyra," she replied. "I've been studying the effects of emotional suppression for years. I believe what's happening to Arya is extraordinary and potentially dangerous." She secretly opposed the Empire's suppression of emotions and offered to help Kyle and Arya understand her abilities. In a dimly lit laboratory, Lyra revealed a shocking truth. The Empire's suppression of emotions was not merely cultural, but enforced through genetic manipulation and technological control. The Qatar citizens were subtly conditioned from birth, their emotions dampened, their individuality suppressed. The Empire was a society of emotional drones, controlled by a select few who benefited from the status quo. Meanwhile, Arya began to experience vivid dreams and visions, fragmented images of a forgotten past. She saw Qatar bathed in vibrant colors, expressing a full range of emotions. She sensed a hidden history of her people, a time when emotions were not feared but celebrated. But she struggled to interpret these visions, to understand their meaning. Varkas, growing impatient with Arya's lack of cooperation, summoned her to his office. The air crackled with barely suppressed power. "You disappoint me, Princess," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "I had hoped you would be more amenable. Unless you agree to undergo a series of experimental procedures to study your abilities, I'm afraid I can't guarantee the safety of your rebel friends." The threat hung heavy in the air. Arya felt a surge of anger, a burning desire to protect those she had left behind. But she knew she couldn't give Varkas what he wanted. Not yet. Kyle, having learned of Varkas's threat from Lyra, knew they were running out of time. Together, they devised a plan, a daring scheme to rescue Arya from Varkas's clutches and expose the Empire's secrets to the wider Qatar population. They sought to spark a new emotional revolution, to awaken the dormant feelings within her people. As Kyle prepared for the rescue, he received a coded message, transmitted through a hidden channel. It was from Theron. He had escaped imprisonment and sought to join forces to overthrow the Empire. An uneasy alliance forged in desperation. Under the cover of darkness, Kyle and Lyra infiltrated Varkas's research facility. The air was thick with the stench of chemicals and the low hum of machinery. They discovered the horrifying extent of the Empire's experiments, the suffering inflicted upon those who resisted emotional control. Qatar were strapped to tables, their minds probed, their emotions suppressed. Kyle confronted Varkas in his private laboratory, the air shimmering with energy fields. "This ends now, Counselor," Kyle said, his voice filled with steadfast perseverance. He used his knowledge of human psychology, his understanding of Varkas's ambition and vanity, to exploit his weaknesses, to create a distraction. While Kyle engaged Varkas in a verbal sparring match, Lyra slipped into Arya's confinement chamber. She disabled the security systems and freed the princess from her restraints. Arya, now fully embracing her emotions, focused her amplified abilities. She unleashed a wave of energy, disrupting the facility's control systems, shattering the technological barriers that suppressed the emotions of the captive Cathar. A wave of feeling surged through the facility, awakening the dormant emotions within the prisoners. A mass rebellion erupted, chaos and confusion spreading like wildfire. As chaos erupted, Kyle, Arya, and Lyra escaped the facility, but they were pursued by Varkas and his elite guard. The fate of the Cathar Empire hung in the balance, dependent on the climactic showdown that was about to unfold. Kyle, Arya, and Lyra guided the ragged procession of escaped Cathar through a narrow mountain pass, the wind whistling a mournful tune through the crystalline peaks. Hope, fragile as spun glass, flickered in their hearts. For days, they had evaded Imperial patrols, relying on Arya's knowledge of the terrain and Kyle's instincts to stay one step ahead. Now, they were close. The ancient city of Viridium, a sanctuary whispered about in hushed tones, lay hidden within these mountains, a place where the Empire's reach had never penetrated. As they crested the final ridge, a breathtaking vista unfolded before them. Nestled in a valley carved by glaciers, Viridium clung to the mountainside, its buildings constructed from the same shimmering crystal that formed the surrounding peaks. Waterfalls cascaded down the cliffs, feeding lush gardens that thrived in the valley's sheltered embrace. It was a paradise, a forgotten jewel of Cathar civilization. Relief washed over the escaped Cathar, but their newfound emotions, still raw and untamed, threatened to overwhelm them. Joy mingled with fear, hope with despair, creating a volatile mix that erupted in uncontrolled outbursts. Some wept openly, others laughed hysterically, while still others huddled together in silent terror. Arya stepped forward, intending to address them, but her voice faltered. How could she, barely mastering her own emotions, guide these lost souls? The weight of leadership, the responsibility for their safety, pressed down on her like the mountain itself. Kyle, sensing her hesitation, stepped beside her. He had seen this before, the chaos that followed trauma, the struggle to rebuild after devastation. "Give them time," he murmured, his voice calm and reassuring. "They need structure, a sense of purpose." He addressed the assembled Cathar, his voice carrying across the valley. "We are safe here for now. But safety is not enough. We must rebuild. We must organize. We must fight for our freedom." He spoke of shared goals, of mutual support, of the strength they could find in unity. He proposed a system of shared responsibilities, of committees and councils, of clear lines of communication. It was a basic framework, adapted from human models of governance, but it offered a semblance of order in the midst of chaos. Lyra, ever the scientist, observed the awakened Cathar with a detached curiosity. She began to collect data, to study their neurological responses, to map the changes that had occurred within their minds. She hoped to find a way to stabilize their emotions, to harness their newfound power without succumbing to its volatility. The Empire suppressed their emotions for a reason, she explained to Kyle. Uncontrolled emotions can be a weapon, but they can also be a liability. Their efforts were interrupted by the arrival of Theron, a Cathar noble with a reputation for military prowess. He came from the mountain pass, some armed friends in tow, his bright armor gleaming in the sunlight. "I am here to assist you now," he said, his voice echoing in the valley. "I am Theron of the House of Valerius, and I will lead you to victory against the Empire." Theron's arrival was met with mixed reactions. Some welcomed him as a savior, a strong leader who could guide them to victory. Others eyed him with suspicion, wary of his noble lineage and his ambition. Arya, torn between her desire for unity and her distrust of Theron, proposed a compromise. "We will form a council of leaders," she declared, "to make decisions collectively. The council will consist of myself, Kyle, Lyra, and Theron." The council was immediately divided. Theron advocated for a swift and brutal attack on the imperial capital, a lightning strike to cripple the Empire's leadership. "We must show them that we are not to be trifled with," he argued, his eyes burning with righteous fury. "We must crush them before they can crush us." Kyle, however, urged a more cautious and strategic approach. "We cannot win through brute force alone," he countered. "The Empire is too powerful. We must focus on winning the hearts and minds of the Cathar population, exposing the Empire's lies and appealing to their suppressed emotions." Theron scoffed. "Naive human sentimentality," he sneered. "The Cathar are not swayed by emotions. They respect strength. They respect power." Lyra, meanwhile, had made a significant discovery. "The Empire's emotional suppression technology," she announced, "relies on a specific frequency that can be disrupted by amplified emotional energy." Arya seized upon this revelation. "We can use their own technology against them," she declared. She began to train the awakened Cathar to harness their emotions, focusing on channeling their anger and frustration into a weapon against the Empire's control. It was a slow and painstaking process, fraught with setbacks and challenges, but Arya persevered, driven by her perseverance to free her people. Theron, impatient with the slow progress, secretly contacted his former allies within the Imperial military. He offered to betray Arya, to deliver her and the other rebels into their hands, in exchange for a pardon and a position of power within the Empire. Kyle, sensing Theron's duplicity, confronted him in private. "I know what you're planning," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You're betraying your own people. You are jealous, human," he spat. "Jealous of my relationship with Arya, jealous of my rightful place as leader of this rebellion." Arya, struggling to reconcile her feelings for both Kyle and Theron, became increasingly withdrawn and isolated. She questioned her ability to lead, her judgment clouded by her conflicting emotions. "I am not strong enough," she confessed to Lyra. "I am not worthy of their trust." Her doubts were shattered by the sudden roar of Imperial warships overhead. Theron's betrayal had come to fruition. The Empire had launched a surprise attack on Viridium, using advanced weaponry to overwhelm the rebels' defenses. Chaos erupted as the rebels scrambled to defend themselves. Blaster fire ripped through the air. Explosions rocked the valley, and the crystalline buildings of Viridium began to crumble. During the evacuation, Lyra, determined to protect the awakened Cathar, was cut off from the others and captured by Imperial forces. She sacrificed herself to ensure their escape, her last act a defiant gesture of defiance against the Empire. Kyle witnessed Lyra's capture, his heart filled with rage and guilt. He had failed to protect her. He had been too trusting, too focused on the political machinations of Theron. He vowed to rescue her, to avenge her sacrifice. Theron, seizing the opportunity presented by the chaos of the attack, attempted to stage a coup, to seize control of the remaining rebels. But his treachery was exposed by Kyle and Arya, who revealed his secret communications with the Empire. Arya, now fully embracing her leadership role, rallied the remaining rebels, her voice ringing with newfound strength and perseverance. "We have suffered a great loss," she declared, "but we will not be defeated. We will fight for our freedom. We will fight for Lyra We will fight for Viridium. Kyle, realizing that they could not defeat the Empire through conventional warfare, proposed a daring plan. We must infiltrate the Imperial capital, he said, and disrupt the emotional suppression technology at its source. Arya, inspired by Kyle's courage and ingenuity, agreed to the plan. I will use my awakened abilities, she vowed, to spark a revolution from within the heart of the Empire. And precision, Kyle finished. The holographic schematics of the capital city shimmering in the dimly lit rebel stronghold. A quiet pause followed. Counselor Bellar, a calm veteran with a cybernetic eye, finally spoke, his voice steady. It's a bold venture, Captain Young. The capital's defenses are strong. Not strong, Arya countered, her voice resonating with newfound authority. Difficult, but not gone. Commander Young has located options. We exploit them. With all due respect, Your Highness, Bellar said, his cybernetic eye glinting. Your recent transformation has made you a target. Leading this mission puts you at unacceptable risk. Arya's silver skin seemed to shimmer faintly. My transformation, as you call it, has also given me abilities I did not possess before. Abilities that will be crucial to this mission's success. And I will not ask others to risk what I am unwilling to. She met Bellar's gaze, her obsidian eyes unwavering. I will lead the infiltration team. Kyle watched her, a surge of pride mixing with a knot of anxiety in his stomach. He knew how much this meant to her, to prove herself, to truly lead. After a moment, Bellar nodded, a grudging respect in his expression. Very well, Your Highness. But if you fall, then I trust Commander Young will ensure our efforts are not in vain. Arya finished, her gaze shifting to Kyle, a silent promise passing between them. The council, after further debate, reluctantly agreed. The fate of the rebellion, and perhaps the entire Qatar civilization, rested on this desperate gamble. The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Kyle and Arya began the selection process for the infiltration team. They needed individuals with specific skills, individuals they could trust with their lives. First, Jax, a former Imperial technician with nimble fingers and a cynical wit. Kyle found him hunched over a deactivated droid, coaxing it back to life with a muttered stream of curses and technical jargon. Can you bypass the capital's security systems, Jax? Kyle asked. Jax looked up, his eyes gleaming with manic energy. Can I? Commander, I designed half of them. Next, Kira, a scout with an uncanny ability to blend into the shadows. Arya found her perched high in the rebel camp's observation tower, her gaze fixed on the horizon, a predatory stillness about her. Can you find a weakness in the capital's energy shield, Kira? Arya asked. Kira turned, her eyes sharp and focused. There's always a weakness, Your Highness. It's just a matter of finding it. Finally, Ronan, a fierce warrior with a reputation for unwavering loyalty and brutal efficiency. Kyle found him sparring with a group of rebels, his movements fluid and deadly. Can you protect the team, Ronan? Kyle asked. Ronan stopped, his gaze intense. With my life, Commander. With the team assembled, preparations began in earnest. Jax provided valuable information about the capital's security systems, revealing that the city was surrounded by an energy shield that detected unauthorized entry. It's a tight net, Commander, Jax said, his fingers flying across a holographic display. No way in without the proper authorization codes. Kira scouted the perimeter of the capital, searching for a weakness in the energy shield. Hours turned into days, but she found no obvious entry points. The shield is flawless, Commander, she reported, her voice grim. There's no way through. Ronan trained the team in close quarters combat, preparing them for potential encounters with Imperial guards. The training sessions were brutal and relentless, pushing the rebels to their limits. "We have to be ready for anything," Ronan said, his voice a low growl. "The Imperials won't hesitate to kill us." Kyle, meanwhile, devised a plan to use a captured Imperial transport ship to bypass the energy shield. "We'll disguise ourselves as a routine supply shipment," he explained, pointing to a holographic image of the transport ship. "The shield will recognize the ship's transponder code and let us through." The team successfully acquired a transport ship, but learned the ship's guidance tech needed a key only top leaders knew. "We're dead in the water," Jack said, his face pale. "Without the access code, we can't even launch the ship." Arya closed her eyes, her silver skin shimmering. "I can get the code," she said, her voice strained. "But it will not be easy." She used her awakened abilities to probe the mind of a captured Imperial officer, extracting the access code. The process was agonizing, leaving her weakened and vulnerable. When she opened her eyes, they were filled with pain. "I have the code," she whispered, her voice barely audible. But it took a lot. Theron, who had been observing from the shadows, stepped forward. "I can pilot the transport ship," he offered, his voice smooth and persuasive. "My knowledge of Imperial protocols is essential for successful infiltration." Kyle, wary of Theron's motives, narrowed his eyes. He didn't trust the former Imperial officer, not one bit. "I'll accompany you in the cockpit, Theron," Kyle said, his hand resting on his sidearm, "just to make sure everything goes smoothly." Theron's lips tightened, but he nodded. "As you wish, Commander." The team successfully entered the capital, disguised as a routine supply shipment. The transport ship glided smoothly through the energy shield, the city's towering structures looming before them. But as they approached the docking bay, they were met with suspicion by Imperial inspectors. "Halt!" one of the inspectors shouted, his voice amplified by a loudspeaker. "Identify yourselves and state your purpose." Arya stepped forward, her regal bearing commanding attention. "We are here to deliver essential supplies to the capital," she said, her voice calm and authoritative. "Our shipment is legitimate." The inspectors, after a tense exchange, reluctantly allowed the team to proceed. But Kyle knew they were being watched. The slightest mistake could expose them. The team reached the central control hub for the emotional suppression technology, only to discover that it was heavily guarded and protected by multiple layers of security. "This is going to be harder than we thought," Jack said, his voice grim. As Jax worked to bypass the security systems, he made a startling discovery. "Commander," he said, his voice urgent, "the suppression technology. It's not a single device. It's a network. Interconnected nodes that span the entire city." Kyle felt a chill run down his spine. A network, not a device. That meant disrupting it would require a far more complex and dangerous operation than they had initially planned. The weight of their mission and the fate of the Qatar people settled heavily on his shoulders. The stale air of the abandoned transport hub hung thick with the scent of ozone and desperation. Crystalline dust motes danced in the dim emergency lighting, illuminating Arya's pale face. She leaned against a deactivated power conduit, her silver skin lacking its usual luster. "The network. It felt vast," she murmured, her voice raspy. Jax hunched over a salvaged console, his fingers flying across the interface, grunted. "Vast and intricately layered, Princess. Imagine a web woven from light, each strand a connection to another node. Disrupting one is like cutting a single thread, annoying, but hardly fatal. To truly cripple the system, we need to sever multiple key points simultaneously. Synchronization is paramount. Kyle paced, his brow furrowed. Smaller teams then, each targeting a specific node. It's riskier, but more efficient. We hit them hard, hit them fast, and disappear before they can react. He glanced at Arya, and it minimizes the strain on you. Arya straightened, a spark of defiance flickering in her obsidian eyes. I will not be sidelined, Kyle. My people suffer under this blanket of enforced calm. I will lead a team. Theron stepped forward, his expression earnest. With respect, Highness, your condition. Perhaps it would be wiser to remain here, coordinating efforts. I appreciate your concern, Theron, Arya replied, her voice firm. But my place is with my people, and I know this city. I know its hidden pathways. Theron bowed slightly. Then, allow me to accompany you. My knowledge of the capital's infrastructure could prove invaluable in avoiding detection. Kyle's gaze narrowed, his gut twisting with unease. Kira, you'll go with them. Keep an eye on things. He didn't elaborate, but the unspoken message hung heavy in the air. Kira, her face impassive, simply nodded. Within minutes, the teams dispersed, melting into the labyrinthine underbelly of the capital. Kyle watched them go, a knot of anxiety tightening in his chest. Jax's team struck first. A surge of power, a burst of bright flashes, and then silence. Node offline, Jax announced, his voice echoing over the calm. Sector Gamma 9 is dark. A ripple of voices echoed through the comms. Ronan's team wasn't so lucky. A burst of laser fire, followed by shouts and the clang of metal against metal. We're pinned down, Ronan yelled, his voice strained. Nodes almost lost, but were under attack. The sounds of the conflict grew louder, mixed with strained noises. Then, silence, followed by Ronan's heavy breathing. Node offline. We've got wounded. Arya's team moved with practiced stealth, navigating the narrow corridors and maintenance tunnels. Theron, true to his word, guided them with ease, pointing out hidden security cameras and patrol routes. As they approached their target, a reinforced security checkpoint loomed ahead, bathed in harsh blue light. Bypass is impossible, Theron whispered. We'll have to go through them. Arya closed her eyes, focusing on the city around her. The suppressed emotions of her people, a dull ache of resignation, a flicker of suppressed anger, a yearning for something more washed over her, amplified by her growing connection to Kyle. A wave of empathy, so intense it almost overwhelmed her, surged through her, and her silver skin shimmered with a faint, ethereal glow. She felt a surge of power, a sense of purpose she had never known before. Theron used Arya's moment of distraction to subtly tap a sequence into his wrist-mounted comm, transmitting a burst of coded data. Kyle, monitoring the comms from their hidden base, noticed the brief transmission. His suspicion spiked. Theron, what was that? Theron's voice, smooth and unctuous, filled Kyle's ear. Merely a routine status report to my superiors, Captain. Ensuring they are aware of our progress. Kyle's teeth clenched. Routine reports can wait. We're in the middle of a high-stakes operation. Arya touched his arm, her obsidian eyes filled with concern. Kyle, what is it? He hesitated, then met her gaze. I don't trust him, Arya. I saw him send a message. Something's not right. Arya's expression softened. I know the risks we are taking, Kyle. And I know the feelings I have developed for you. I will not let anything jeopardize our mission or our connection. She reached out, her cool fingers tracing the line of his jaw. When I touched you, something changed. Not just for me, but for my people. I saw a glimpse of what we could be. A memory, hidden deep within my mind. A time before the suppression technology. A time when the Cathar embraced emotion, embraced life. It was beautiful, Kyle, and it was stolen from us. Kira's voice, sharp and urgent, shattered the moment. Captain, we have a problem. Theron is communicating with Imperial forces. He's a traitor. Before Kyle could react, a stun blast ripped through the air, knocking him off his feet. He looked up to see Theron standing over Arya, a disruptor pistol aimed at her head. "Forgive me, Highness," Theron said, his voice devoid of emotion. "But some wounds are best left unhealed. Some emotions are too dangerous to unleash." He activated a containment field, trapping Arya within a shimmering energy cage. "My allegiance is to the preservation of Cathar stability. And you, Princess, have become a threat to that stability." Kyle scrambled to his feet, adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Theron, don't do this!" Theron ignored him, his eyes fixed on Arya. "The suppression must continue, for the good of the Empire." Suddenly, Imperial guards swarmed the transport hub, laser fire erupting from every direction. Kyle and the remaining team members were caught in a crossfire, their escape route cut off. The battle for Arya, and for the future of the Cathar, had begun. Rage, a white-hot tide, threatened to consume Kyle. Theron's betrayal was a personal violation. A knife twisted in the gut. He forced it down, channeling it into cold, precise orders. Jax, diversion. Now, Kira, Ronan, with me. We break through. Jax, ever the pragmatist, didn't hesitate. Copy that. Give me 30 seconds. His fingers danced across his console, lines of code cascading down the screen. 30 seconds later, the air crackled with energy. Distant explosions rocked the immediate area as remotely triggered detonations ripped through several Imperial transports and patrol vehicles. The chaos was instantaneous. Alarms blared, and panicked shouts echoed across the comms. Kira, her face a mask of relentless drive, moved with a speed and ferocity Kyle hadn't witnessed before. Her energy blade flashed, striking guards, each move precise and swift. Regret, a bitter feeling, drove her onward. "I should have known," she muttered, pushing a guard to a wall. "I won't stop now." Ronan, his side sore from the clash, moved ahead, firing fast with his energy rifle. Gritting his teeth against the pain, he laid down a steady stream of fire, pinning down the remaining guards and allowing Kyle to advance. "Go, Kyle," he grunted. "Get her back." Kyle, his power armor humming with suppressed fury, charged towards Theron's last known location. The escape route was a heavily guarded corridor, but the Imperial forces were disorganized and disoriented by Jax's diversion. He moved like a predator, his every action focused on one goal: reaching Arya. He found Theron at the end of the corridor, standing beside a sleek, waiting transport. The Cathar turned, his expression a mixture of defiance and regret. "It didn't have to be this way, Kyle," Theron said, his voice devoid of its usual warmth. "You betrayed us," Kyle snarled, his hand instinctively reaching for his energy blade. "You betrayed Arya." "I acted in the best interests of the Cathar Empire," Theron countered, his eyes hardening. "I serve the Order of Equilibrium. We believe that emotional suppression is essential for maintaining order and stability." "Order? Stability?" "You kidnapped Arya. Arya's awakening poses a grave threat," Theron explained, his voice imbued with conviction. Her uncontrolled emotions could destabilize our entire society. We cannot allow that to happen. A flicker of movement caught Kyle's eye. He saw Arya, restrained but defiant, inside the transport. Her obsidian eyes, usually devoid of emotion, burned with a fierce intensity. Even from this distance, he could feel her commitment, her unwavering connection to him. "Arya!" Kyle shouted, lunging towards Theron. Theron met him head-on, his movements fluid and precise. Their fighting styles were a stark contrast. Kyle's raw power and aggression against Theron's calculated grace and efficiency. Every blow was a clash of ideologies, a battle for Arya's future. "You don't understand the true nature of the Cathar," Theron hissed, parrying Kyle's attack. "Our strength lies in our control, in our ability to suppress the chaos of emotions." "You're wrong," Kyle retorted, thumping his hand into Theron's jaw. "Emotions are what make us human. They're what make us strong." During a brief respite in the brutal exchange, Theron spoke again, his voice tight with desperation. "Did you know, human, that Arya's suppressed memories contain information about a powerful ancient artifact? An artifact that could amplify emotional abilities 1,000-fold?" Kyle faltered, momentarily stunned by the revelation. Theron seized the opportunity, disarming Kyle with a swift maneuver. He held his energy blade to Kyle's throat, his eyes filled with a chilling grit. "It ends here, human." Kyle stared back, his mind racing. He could kill Theron, end this now. But what if Arya was lost forever? What if Theron was the only key to finding her? Driven by his love for Arya, Kyle made a split-second decision. He lowered his hands, surrendering. "Spare me," he said, his voice tight with suppressed fury. "And maybe, just maybe, I'll let you live long enough to tell me where you're taking her." Theron hesitated, his expression unreadable. Then, with a contemptuous snort, he lowered his blade. "You're a fool, human, but your foolishness may yet serve my purpose." He turned and entered the transport, the doors sliding shut behind him. As the transport sped away, Jax's voice crackled over the comms. "Kyle, what happened?" "We lost visual." "Theron got away," Kyle said, his voice grim. "But I let him go." "What? Why?" Kira demanded, her voice incredulous. "I need him to lead us to Arya," Kyle explained. "And I think Jax just found our way to track him." Jax's voice, now permeated with excitement, cut through the tension. "Got something." Theron's weapon, he dropped it during the fight. "I'm running diagnostics. Stand by." Bingo! There's a hidden tracking device, broadcasting a signal. It's leading us to a heavily guarded Imperial stronghold, about 50 clicks north of here. Kyle's blood ran cold. A stronghold? What kind of stronghold? "Preliminary scans indicate it's not just a prison," Jax replied, his voice grim. "It's also a research facility. They're studying something. And it's big, Kyle. Real big." Kyle felt a knot of dread tighten in his stomach. "Studying what, Jax?" "Emotions, Kyle. They're studying emotions and weaponizing them." The realization hit Kyle like a physical blow. Arya's capture wasn't just about suppressing her emotions, it was about exploiting her unique abilities, turning her into a weapon. Suddenly, alarms blared, and the ground shook beneath their feet. "We've been detected," Ronan shouted. "Incoming?" Imperial forces, alerted to their presence, launched a coordinated attack. Laser fire rained down around them, forcing them to retreat and regroup. "We need to get out of here," Kira yelled, pulling Kyle towards cover. "We're outgunned and outmanned." As they retreated, Kyle's mind raced. He had to rescue Arya. He had to stop Theron and the Order of Equilibrium. He had to protect her. from becoming a weapon. "We're not giving up," Kyle said, his voice filled with persistence. "We're going to infiltrate that stronghold. We're going to rescue Arya." "It's risky, Kyle," Kira said, worried. "That place will be heavily guarded. We'll never succeed." "We have to try," Kyle said. "Arya's life depends on it, and I know a few things about network vulnerabilities that they don't." Kira looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and admiration. "Then we're with you," she said, her voice resolute. "All the way." The team gathered in a secluded alcove, their faces grim. They had limited resources, a desperate plan, and the knowledge that this could be their final stand. But they were united by their loyalty to Kyle, their commitment to rescue Arya, and their unwavering belief in the power of the human spirit. The odds were stacked against them, but they were ready to fight. The crystalline energies of the artifact still pulsed in the air, a silent hum that vibrated through Kyle's very bones. Arya lay limp in his arms, her silver skin cool to the touch. "Jax, report," Kyle barked, his voice tight with urgency. A crackle of static, then Jax's voice, strained but clear. "Security systems are still hot, but I've managed to loop a few camera feeds. Enough to give you some blind spots. Get moving now. This place is about to be swarming with stormtroopers." Kira materialized beside him, her violet eyes scanning the corridor. "There are traps layered throughout this section. Pressure plates, laser grids. I can guide you, but we need to move fast." They moved, Kira leading the way, her lithe form weaving through the seemingly empty corridors. Kyle cradled Arya close, her weight a constant reminder of what was at stake. They bypassed laser grids that would have sliced them to ribbons, avoided pressure plates that would have triggered alarms. Jax's manipulated camera feeds gave them precious seconds, but Kyle knew their time was running out. They rounded a corner and stopped short. A row of cells lined the corridor, each holding a Cathar citizen. But these were not the proud, stoic Cathar Kyle had seen in the palace. These Cathar were slumped against the walls, their eyes vacant, their bioluminescent filigree dull and flickering erratically. Some trembled, others wept silently, their spirits broken. "What did they do to them?" Kyle whispered, his voice thick with anger. Kira's face was grim. "Emotional suppression experiments. They're trying to isolate and weaponize specific emotions." One of the prisoners, an elderly Cathar woman, looked up at Kyle, her eyes filled with a profound sadness. "Help us," she rasped, her voice barely audible. "Please, end this." Kyle's grip tightened on Arya. He looked at the broken Cathar, then back at Arya's still face. "I won't let them do this to you. I won't let them turn your emotions into a weapon." His tenacity hardened. He would burn this whole damn facility to the ground if he had to. They pressed on, reaching a large reinforced door. Jax's voice crackled in their ears. "This is it. Research lab. Nasty stuff going on in there. I'm seeing massive energy spikes, powered by Lumion crystals." Kira placed her hand on the door. "I sense a great deal of pain and something else. Something cold and calculating." Kyle nodded grimly. "Let's go." Jax bypassed the door controls, and it hissed open, revealing a scene of sterile horror. Scientists in white coats moved between rows of complex machinery, their faces illuminated by the eerie glow of Lumion crystals. Crystalline tubes snaked across the room, connected to devices that hummed with hardly restrained energy. In the center of the room, a large machine pulsed with a sickly green light. Jax's voice, filled with horror, filled their ears. "I'm accessing the data logs." They're trying to create a weapon that can induce mass hysteria or apathy on entire planets. A planetary emotion bomb. Kira stiffened. I sense a powerful emotional presence behind that shielded door. She pointed to a reinforced steel door at the far end of the lab. Arya, she's in there. Kyle didn't hesitate. He raised his weapon and fired, shattering a nearby control panel. Alarms blared to life, bathing the lab in red light. Let's go! They fought their way through the lab, Kyle's precise shots taking down scientists while Kira disabled security drones with swift, brutal efficiency. They reached the sealed door, and Kyle set a device. The blast rocked the door, wrenching it from its frame. Inside, Arya was secured to a complex machine, her skin glowing faintly. Tubes snaked from the machine, feeding into a crystalline matrix that pulsed with raw emotional energy. Kyle rushed to her side, frantically trying to disconnect the tubes. But as he touched a connector, an alarm sounded, and a light flashed above the door. Security breach! Security breach! Guards are on their way, Ronan's voice echoed. Move! I'll hold them off. Kyle hesitated, torn between saving Arya and staying to help his friend. Don't be a fool, Kyle, Ronan shouted. Save the princess. That's the mission. Now go. With a heavy heart, Kyle ripped the last tube from Arya's body. The machine sputtered, then overloaded, unleashing a surge of raw emotional energy that washed over the facility. The world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of colors and sensations. Kyle felt a wave of grief, then rage, then a profound sense of loss. He stumbled backward, overwhelmed. Then, as quickly as it came, the surge subsided. But something had changed. Arya stirred in his arms, her eyes fluttering open. But these were not the vacant obsidian eyes he had come to know. These eyes were filled with a swirling vortex of emotions: fear, confusion, hope, and something else. Recognition. Images flashed through her mind, and Kyle felt them too: a vast crystalline city, a council of elders, a hidden chamber, and a device of immense power. The ancient artifact, a device capable of controlling and amplifying emotions. Then, as suddenly as she had awakened, Arya's eyes glazed over, and she collapsed back into his arms, unconscious. Arya, Kyle cried, shaking her gently. But she didn't respond. She was in a coma. Jax's voice, frantic, filled their ears. I've managed to disable the main security grid, but the whole damn stronghold is on high alert. You need to get out of there now. They raced through the corridors, but their escape route was blocked by a battalion of Imperial soldiers, led by a ruthless-looking commander with a cybernetic eye. There they are, the commander snarled. Secure the princess, kill the rest. Kyle surveyed the scene, his mind racing. They were trapped, outnumbered, outgunned. He looked at Kira, then at Arya, still unconscious in his arms. He knew what he had to do. Kira, he said, his voice firm. Take Arya. Get her out of here. There's a hidden passage behind that support column. It leads to the old maintenance tunnels. I'll create a diversion. Kira's eyes widened. No, Kyle. We can fight them together. There's no time to argue, Kyle said, his voice brooking no argument. Arya is the priority. You need to get her to safety. That's an order. Kira hesitated, her face etched with anguish. But she knew Kyle was right. She nodded reluctantly. Be careful, Kyle. She took Arya from his arms, her touch surprisingly gentle. Then, with a final lingering look at Kyle, she disappeared behind the support column. Kyle turned to face the Imperial soldiers, his weapon raised. Well, gentlemen, he said, a grim smile playing on his lips. Looks like it's just you and me. He opened fire, stopping several soldiers before they could react. He moved with a speed and precision born of desperation, using his knowledge of the stronghold's layout to his advantage. He ducked behind cover, flanked the enemy, and used grenades to create chaos. But there were too many of them. They advanced relentlessly, their weapons firing in a coordinated barrage. Kyle fought bravely, but he was eventually overwhelmed. He felt a searing pain in his side as a blaster bolt struck home. He stumbled, then fell to his knees, his weapon clattering to the floor. The Imperial commander approached him, a cruel smile on his face. "It's over, human," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Your princess is as good as ours." Kyle looked up at the commander, his eyes filled with defiance. "You may have captured me," he said, his voice hoarse, "but you haven't won. Not yet." Then, darkness closed in. Arya's fate was uncertain. The weaponization of Emotions Project was still active. And Kyle Young, the human who dared to defy the Qatar Empire, was now a prisoner. The kind that would have gotten them serious prison time if the authorities found out. Kira, cradling Arya's limp form, sprinted through the twisting obsidian corridors. Each echoing footstep was a hammer blow against the silence, a silence soon to be shattered. Behind her, the rhythmic thud of armored boots grew louder, closer. Imperial soldiers, alerted to her escape, were in pursuit. The hidden passage, a relic from a forgotten era of Qatar rebellion, was narrow and claustrophobic. Bioluminescent fungi cast an eerie green glow on the damp walls, illuminating the intricate carvings that spoke of a time when emotions flowed freely. Arya's silver skin felt cold against Kira's, a chilling reminder of the princess's fading life force. Finally, she reached it, the rendezvous point. A small, circular chamber, bathed in the soft blue light of a concealed energy source. Waiting for her was a figure cloaked in shadow, their face obscured by a hooded robe. "You made it," the figure rasped, stepping into the light. It was a Cathar, but unlike the emotionless drones of the Imperial court, his eyes held a spark of defiance, of sorrow. "I am Zaltar, formerly of the Imperial Science Division. I defected when I learned the Emperor's true intentions for the artifact." Zaltar gestured towards a sleek, unmarked transport waiting just beyond the chamber. "This will take you to the remote moon of Viridia. I've also prepared medical supplies to stabilize the princess. But I must warn you, her coma is worsening. The artifact, it is calling to her, but her spirit is too weak to respond." As Kira carefully placed Arya in the transport's medical bay, Zaltar laid a hand on her arm. "The temple on Viridia. It is protected by ancient defense mechanisms. Entering it is extremely dangerous. But the artifact, it is our only hope." The transport doors hissed shut, sealing Kira and Arya inside. As the ship lifted off, leaving Zaltar behind, Kira's mind flashed back to the moment she learned of the artifact's existence, a moment intertwined with Kyle's capture. The interrogation chamber was a stark white cube, devoid of any comfort. Kyle, strapped to a cold metal chair, tasted blood in his mouth. His body ached, a symphony of throbbing pain orchestrated by the Imperial commander, a tall, imposing Qatar with eyes like chips of ice. "Where is it, human?" the commander hissed, his voice a low, menacing growl. "Where is the artifact?" Kyle spat a mouthful of blood onto the pristine floor. "Go to hell." The commander's lips thinned. He signaled to two hulking guards, who stepped forward with cruel smiles. The torture resumed, but Kyle remained defiant, his mind a fortress protecting the artifact's location. He knew its power, its potential, for both salvation and destruction. He couldn't let it fall into the wrong hands, not even if it meant his death. Kira, guided by Zalter's coordinates, piloted the transport through the swirling nebulae. As they approached Viridia, she began to experience vivid, dream-like visions. Images of crumbling temples, lush jungles, and a crystalline sphere pulsating with light flooded her mind. They were Arya's visions, a desperate plea for help, a roadmap to the artifact. Viridia was a world shrouded in mystery, a remote moon teeming with alien life. The temple, a crumbling structure of black stone, stood at the heart of a dense alien jungle. The air was thick with the scent of exotic flora and the sounds of unseen creatures. The temple is protected by ancient defense mechanisms. Zoltar's voice crackled over the comms. Energy fields, sonic barriers, even sentient guardians. Be careful, Kira. The Emperor will stop at nothing to claim the artifact. Kira ignored his warnings. Arya's visions were growing stronger, more insistent. She had to reach the artifact, to save Arya, to protect the galaxy from the Emperor's grasp. She landed the transport near the edge of the jungle, the ship's ramp hissing open to reveal a world of vibrant, dangerous beauty. "I'm going in," she said, her voice firm. "Stay here and monitor Arya's condition. I'll contact you when I have the artifact." Zalter sighed. "Be careful, Kira. The fate of the Cathar may rest on your shoulders." Kira stepped into the jungle, relying on her senses and Arya's visions to guide her. The air was heavy with humidity, the ground slick with moisture. Strange bioluminescent plants cast an eerie glow on the path ahead. Back in the interrogation chamber, Kyle, despite his battered body, refused to give up. Using scraps of metal and discarded wires, he was slowly, painstakingly, constructing a makeshift communication device. It was a long shot, but he had to try. He had to warn his allies, to let them know about the artifact and the Emperor's plans. Deeper into the jungle, Kira encountered them. The Viridians. Sentient creatures with iridescent skin and large, luminous eyes. They were the indigenous people of Viridia, the guardians of the temple. Initially hostile, they surrounded Kira, their weapons raised. But as they sensed Arya's presence, their aggression faded. They recognized her as a descendant of the temple's creators, a bloodline long thought extinct. The Viridians lowered their weapons, their eyes filled with reverence. They led Kira to a hidden entrance to the temple, a passage concealed behind a waterfall of shimmering energy. "We have been waiting for someone to awaken the artifact," their leader said, his voice a melodic hum. "It is our sacred duty to protect it, but only a descendant of the creators can unlock its true potential." Kira entered the temple, navigating treacherous traps and intricate puzzles. She moved through corridors that shifted and changed, relying on Arya's visions and the Viridians' knowledge to guide her. Finally, she reached the central chamber. In the center of the room, bathed in an ethereal light, floated the artifact, a crystalline sphere pulsating with emotional energy. As Kira approached, a holographic projection flickered to life. It was an ancient Cathar, his face etched with wisdom and sorrow. "Greetings, descendant," the projection said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "You have found the heart of Cathar, the source of our people's emotions. But be warned, this artifact can amplify either positive or negative emotions, leading to either salvation or destruction. It requires a specific key to unlock its full potential." Selfless love. The holographic projection flickered and died, leaving Kira alone with the artifact. She reached out, her fingers brushing against its smooth, crystalline surface, Suddenly the ground trembled. The temple shook. The sound of approaching ships filled the air. Imperial forces, led by the ruthless commander, had arrived. They had tracked Kira's transport signal. "Seize the artifact!" the commander bellowed, his voice amplified by the temple's acoustics. "Destroy the temple and the indigenous creatures if they resist." They resist. Kira, startled by the holographic warning, struggled to understand the artifact's activation mechanism. The crystalline sphere pulsed with an inner light, displaying complex Cathar symbols she couldn't decipher. The air crackled with static, a premonition of the impending chaos. A deafening roar ripped through the temple as the main entrance exploded inward, showering the chamber with dust and debris. "Secure the artifact!" the Imperial commander bellowed, his voice amplified by his helmet's vocoder. He strode into the temple, a towering figure in black armor, his face obscured by a metallic mask. He gestured dismissively at the indigenous creatures, their pleas for mercy ignored. "Eliminate any resistance." Kira's breath hitched. The creatures, small and furry with large, pleading eyes, huddled together in fear. Without a second thought, she lunged forward, placing herself between the commander and the terrified beings. "Stop!" she shouted, her voice barely audible above the din. "Leave them alone." The commander paused, his masked face turning towards her. "Stand aside, human. This doesn't concern you." He raised his blaster, the weapon glinting menacingly in the flickering light. "It concerns me when you threaten innocent creatures," Kira retorted, her heart pounding in her chest. The commander sighed, a sound like escaping steam. "Foolish, I gave you a chance." He barked an order to his troops. "Subdue her, but try not to damage the merchandise." Two soldiers advanced, their blasters raised, but before they could reach Kira, the creatures surged forward, their small bodies a whirlwind of claws and teeth. A chaotic skirmish erupted, the air filled with blaster fire, animalistic cries, and the shouts of the soldiers. Amidst the chaos, Kira stumbled backward, her hand brushing against the crystalline sphere. A jolt of energy surged through her, a wave of raw emotion that slammed into her mind. It was the creature's fear, their desperation, their primal terror amplified 1,000-fold. The sphere vibrated intensely, its light growing brighter. The temple groaned, the ancient structure protesting the surge of negative energy. Cracks spiderwebbed across the walls, and dust rained down from the ceiling. The air crackled with ozone, and the scent of decay filled Kira's nostrils. She gasped, clutching her head. The artifact was reacting to the negative emotions, feeding on them, amplifying them. If she didn't do something, the temple would collapse, burying everyone inside. She had to counteract the chaos. But how? A wave of dizziness washed over her, and a memory flashed through her mind. Kyle, strapped to a cold metal table, his body bruised and bloodied. An Imperial interrogator stood over him, a cruel smile on his face. "Tell us where the artifact is hidden, human, and this can all end." Kyle coughed, spitting blood. "Never," he rasped, his voice hoarse. "I will never betray Arya." The interrogator nodded, and the pain intensified. But Kyle closed his eyes, focusing on Arya's face, on the warmth of her touch, on the unbreakable bond between them. He drew strength from their love, refusing to break, refusing to betray her or the artifact. Kira opened her eyes, her commitment hardened. She had to focus, to channel a powerful, selfless emotion. She closed her eyes, picturing Arya, picturing the creatures, picturing a future where they were all safe. She focused on her desire to save them, to protect them from the darkness that threatened to consume them. She pushed back against the artifact's chaotic energy, attempting to channel a pure, selfless love. A warmth spread through her body, a gentle fire that pushed back against the cold fear. The image of Arya's face filled her mind, her eyes filled with hope. The creature's fear began to recede, replaced by a flicker of trust. A beam of pure white light erupted from the crystalline sphere, momentarily halting the temple's destruction. A protective barrier shimmered into existence, encasing Kira and the creatures in a bubble of energy. The temple fell silent, the only sound the gentle hum of the artifact. The Imperial commander stared in disbelief, his masked face betraying his frustration. "Break through that barrier!" he roared, his voice filled with rage. The troops launched a wave of bright fire, but the energy beams faded softly near the strong shield. The artifact's energy was solid. Suddenly, Arya's presence intensified, a wave of emotion that washed over Kira. A clearer, more vivid vision flooded her mind. Arya, her silver skin shimmering in the dim light, her obsidian eyes filled with desperation. "Kira, help me!" she pleaded, her voice echoing in Kira's mind. "You must find the chamber, the heart of the temple." The vision shifted, revealing a hidden chamber within the temple, a place bathed in soft, ethereal light. In the center of the chamber, a complex Cathar device pulsed with energy, a place where the artifact's power could be controlled and amplified for healing. The protective barrier flickered, its energy waning. The commander raised his weapon, preparing to launch a final assault. "This ends now," he snarled. Kira knew she had to act fast. Guided by Arya's vision, and trusting the creatures who had risked their lives to protect her, she made a split-second decision. "Protect this entrance," she said to the creatures, her voice filled with grit. "I have to go inside." She turned and ran towards a section of the wall that seemed to shimmer slightly, a hidden doorway revealed in Arya's vision. Another memory flashed. Kyle, hurt and tired. Finding a chance, he struck his arm at the guard's neck, the man falling to the floor. Kyle grabbed the guard's weapon and fled from his cell, vowing to find Arya and Kira, vowing to protect them from the Imperials. Kira reached the shimmering wall and stepped through, finding herself in a narrow corridor that led into the darkness. She entered the hidden chamber. The air was cool and still, filled with a faint, humming energy. In the center of the chamber stood an ancient Cathar control panel, covered in intricate symbols she didn't understand. The panel pulsed with light, and the air around it crackled with energy. Arya's voice echoed in her mind, clear and strong. "Activate the panel, Kira. Follow my guidance. But be warned, the process is unstable. It will either stabilize the artifact or destroy it completely." Before Kira could react, the Imperial commander burst into the chamber, his face contorted with rage. "You can't stop me, human," he roared, raising his blaster. "The artifact will be ours." He raised his weapon, preparing to kill Kira and seize the artifact. Kira faced a desperate choice, the fate of the artifact, and perhaps the entire galaxy, hanging in the balance. The Imperial commander advanced, his polished boots clicking on the ancient stone floor. Kira hesitated, her hand hovering over the control panel, sweat slicking her palm. "Trust your instincts," Arya's voice echoed in her mind, a phantom whisper against the commander's harsh pronouncements. "Activate it." Disregarding the commander's threat, a guttural snarl that promised pain, Kira pressed a series of symbols on the control panel. Each glyph felt strangely familiar, resonating with a forgotten part of her. A complex activation sequence initiated, the air crackling with unseen energy. The chamber pulsed with an ethereal light as the artifact responded. The control panel glowed with intricate patterns, lines of light snaking across its surface like veins of molten gold. A low hum filled the air, vibrating in Kira's bones. The Imperial commander, realizing the artifact was about to activate, roared in frustration. He raised his weapon, a sleek energy pistol, and fired at the control panel, aiming to disrupt the process, to shatter the fragile hope blooming in Kira's chest. Instinct took over. Kira didn't think, she reacted. A surge of energy erupted from the artifact, coalescing into a shimmering, translucent shield that deflected the shot. The energy bolt dissipated against the barrier, leaving a faint scorch mark on its surface. She was protected, for now. Then, the visions began. Holographic images flickered into existence, swirling around the chamber. Ancient Cathar, their faces etched with a mixture of pride and sorrow, paraded before her. Their history unfolded in a rush of fragmented memories. A society that prized logic above all else. A deliberate suppression of emotions, and the catastrophic consequences that followed a descent into cold, ruthless efficiency that nearly destroyed them all. The artifact, Kira realized with chilling clarity, was designed to restore emotional balance to the Cathar, to reawaken what they had lost. But it required a powerful emotional catalyst to function properly, a spark to ignite the dormant flame. Far away, across the treacherous, alien landscape, Kyle navigated a dense forest. Twisted, bioluminescent trees clawed at the sky, their roots snaking across the uneven ground. He moved with a practiced ease, his combat training honed by years of mercenary work kicking in. He encountered a group of indigenous creatures, small, furry beings with large, luminous eyes huddled together in fear. Imperial patrols sought them out, their energy weapons humming in the woods. Kyle, acting quickly, engaged the patrols, his movements a study in swift action. 3 shots, 3 down. Learning about the artifact's location from the grateful creatures, Kyle convinced them to guide him to the temple. He spoke of Arya, of the need to protect the artifact, of the hope it represented. A pact arose, from their will to guard the shrine and hope for bright days ahead. Inside the shrine, the royal leader, his face a mask of fury, gave commands to all. Bypass the shield. Capture her alive. She's more valuable that way. He recognized Kira's potential, her connection to the artifact, her ability to wield its power. He wouldn't waste her. Struggling to understand the artifact's purpose, Kira was suddenly assaulted by a vision so intense it nearly brought her to her knees. Arya, her face pale and drawn, was being tortured. Electric shocks coursed through her body, her screams echoing in Kira's mind. The vision fueled her commitment, hardening her drive. She wouldn't let them hurt Arya. The artifact intensified its energy output, the chamber vibrating with increasing force. The control panel pulsed with blinding light. A feedback loop threatened to overload the temple's systems, endangering everyone inside. The air crackled with ozone, the scent sharp and metallic. Kyle and the creatures reached the temple entrance, finding it heavily guarded. Imperial troops stood watch, their weapons trained on the jungle. Kyle signaled to his new allies. It was time. They prepared to launch a coordinated assault, a desperate attempt to breach the defenses and reach Kira. The Imperial commander, his eyes burning with manic intensity, cornered Kira. "You don't understand," he hissed, his voice dripping with venom. "This artifact, it can control the galaxy's emotions. I will turn them into weapons, forge an empire of fear." Kira stared at him, her heart pounding in her chest. Then she understood. The emotional catalyst, the artifact needed wasn't just any emotion. It was a powerful act of self-sacrifice, a willingness to give up everything for the greater good. Kyle and the creatures breached the temple defenses, their assault a chaotic symphony of gunfire and primal roars. The Imperial troops, caught off guard, fell back in disarray. The diversion was working, buying Kira precious time. Making her choice, Kira prepared to initiate the artifact's final activation sequence. She knew it would likely cost her life. The energy surging through her veins felt both terrifying and exhilarating. Arya. Flashback. Arya, before her emotional suppression, before the coldness settled in her eyes, embraced Kyle. Her voice trembled with a mixture of love and fear. "I'm scared, Kyle," she whispered, her fingers clutching his shirt. What if this changes everything? What if we lose ourselves?" Her vulnerability was a stark contrast to the emotionless princess he had first met. Kira channeled her love for Arya, her desire to protect the creatures, her hope for a better future. Her fingers danced across the control panel, inputting the final sequence. A wave of pure emotional energy erupted from the artifact, washing over the chamber, filling every corner with blinding light. The Imperial commander lunged at Kira, a desperate attempt to stop her, but Kyle, having fought his way through the temple, arrived just in time. He tackled the commander to the ground, sending them both crashing into a nearby pillar. The artifact fully activated, emitting a blinding light that engulfed the temple, promising a new dawn or utter destruction. The blinding light faded, leaving the Imperial commander and his troops slumped against the temple walls, unconscious but unharmed. Kira sagged against Kyle, exhausted but triumphant. A wave of energy, unlike anything he'd ever felt, pulsed outwards from the artifact. It wasn't heat or light, but pure emotion, washing over the temple, reaching out across Cathar and beyond. Arya gasped, her silver skin shimmering with an unfamiliar iridescence. The obsidian depths of her eyes widened, no longer flat and lifeless, but swirling with a kaleidoscope of colors. Joy, sharp and bright as a supernova. Sadness, a deep, aching void. Love, a warmth that spread through her like liquid starlight. Fear, a cold primal instinct she barely understood. She stumbled, overwhelmed, her hand flying to her head. The connection with Kira through the artifact was a torrent, a flood of shared experience. Kyle steadied Kira, his arm around her shoulders. "You did it," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved them, Kira. You saved Cathar." He gestured towards the landscape outside the temple, where the sickly pallor that had plagued the planet for centuries seemed to be receding, replaced by a faint, verdant glow. The emotional energy wasn't just awakening the Cathar, it was healing their world. Then, a voice echoed in their minds, clear as a bell, yet intimate as a lover's whisper. "Kyle, Kira, I don't know how to thank you. I feel everything. And it's beautiful." It was Arya, her thoughts reaching out to them, a bridge forged across the void of her former emptiness. "I love you both." A flicker of images, a fragmented memory, a battlefield bathed in crimson light. Cathar warriors consumed by a berserk rage, unleashing weapons of unimaginable destruction. The aftermath. A planet scarred, a people broken, their leaders decreeing the suppression of all emotion. A desperate attempt to prevent another cataclysm. Arya's voice, now imbued with newfound strength and vulnerability, echoed across the crystalline plazas of Qatar's capital, reaching every citizen, every heart. "My people," she began, her voice amplified by the temple's ancient technology. "For generations we have lived in fear, denying ourselves the very essence of life. We believed that emotion was a weakness, a path to destruction. But we were wrong. We were terribly, tragically wrong. We must learn from the mistakes of the past, embrace our emotions, and find balance, understanding, and compassion. Across Cathar's citizens wept openly, laughed with unrestrained joy, embraced loved ones with fierce tenderness. The rigid, emotionless facade that had defined their culture for centuries crumbled, replaced by a vibrant tapestry of human and Cathar expression. A cultural renaissance had begun. Kira turned to Kyle, a determined glint in her eyes. "They're going to need help," she said. "Guidance. We can't just leave them to figure this out on their own." Kyle nodded, his heart swelling with pride and love for both women. "Then we'll stay. We'll help them build a new future together." Later, in the serene privacy of their chambers, overlooking the burgeoning Cathar capital, Kyle took Arya's hand. The city below pulsed with a soft, multicolored light, a reflection of the emotions now flowing freely through its inhabitants. "It's incredible, Arya," he said, his voice filled with awe. "What you've done. What you're doing." Arya turned to him, her eyes shining with a love he could now see reflected in their depths. "You showed me what it means to truly feel, Kyle. Your empathy, your love. It unlocked something within me that I never knew existed. You gave me life." Kyle cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs tracing the delicate filigree of her bioluminescent markings. "And you, Arya, you inspired me with your strength, your resilience, your willingness to embrace the unknown. You've made me a better person, a more complete person." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, gazing at the vibrant city below. "What do you think the future holds?" Kyle asked, his voice soft. Arya smiled. A genuine, radiant smile that transformed her face. "A future where our bond can bridge the gap between our two cultures, Kyle. A future where Cathar and Earth can learn from each other, grow together, and create a new era of peace and understanding." Years later, Arya and Kyle stood on a balcony overlooking the Cathar capital. The city was now a symphony of light and sound, filled with laughter, music, and the open expression of emotions. Their child, a small figure with silver skin and bright, curious human eyes, played nearby, giggling as they chased a bioluminescent butterfly. This child exhibited both human empathy and Cathar emotional sensitivity, a living testament to the power of their union. Arya laced her fingers through Kyle's, her touch sending a familiar warmth through his veins. Their bond resonated with love and hope, a silent promise that echoed across the city, across the planet, across the stars. Their story was a testament to the power of human connection, a beacon of hope in a galaxy often divided by fear and prejudice. Love, they knew, truly knew no boundaries.